The rain in London didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of night that felt heavy with unsaid words. Inside the penthouse apartment overlooking the Thames, the silence was expensive. Everything in Emily's life was expensive. The Italian marble countertops, the velvet curtains that pooled on the floor like spilled wine, the silence itself. It had cost her 10 years of relentless work to afford this quiet. Emily stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of sparkling water. At 32, she was the face of Lumina Cosmetics, a brand built on the promise of transparency and natural beauty. It was ironic, she often thought, how much artificial effort went into maintaining that image of natural. From the master bathroom down the hall, she could hear the faint, rhythmic thrum of the shower. Mark was in there. Her husband. The man who had been featured on the cover of GQ last month under the headline, "The Modern Gentleman." Mark, with his perfect teeth, his easy laugh, and his ability to make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. He was singing a low, hummed tune that drifted through the hallway. He sounded happy. Emily turned away from the window and walked toward the kitchen island. The room was dim, lit only by the under-cabinet LEDs that cast a sterile, surgical glow on the granite. And there it was, lying on the counter like a sleek, black obsidian stone. Mark's phone. He usually took it everywhere. To the gym, to the bathroom, even to the bedside table while he slept. It was an extension of his hand. But tonight, in a rare moment of carelessness, or perhaps the arrogance of a man who believes he is untouchable, he had left it behind. Emily reached for a crystal coaster to set down her water glass. As she did, the phone screen woke up. The IT wasn't a ringing call. It was a silent notification, a banner of light cutting through the dim kitchen. Notification, message from Chloe, assistant. Emily froze. Her hand hovered inches from the screen. Chloe was their 22-year-old personal assistant. A bright, eager girl fresh out of university whom Emily had mentored. She was the girl who fetched their coffee, organized Mark's dry cleaning, and managed Emily's calendar with terrifying efficiency. A message at 9 p.m. wasn't unusual. Perhaps a flight had been canceled. Perhaps a meeting had been rescheduled. But the preview text didn't look like a schedule change. The text was short. Just 2 lines. "I can't wait until tonight. Acting polite around her in the office is exhausting. When are you going to leave her?" The air in the room seemed to vanish. Emily stared at the words. She read them once. Twice. A third time. The words didn't make sense, like a foreign language she couldn't translate. Her. Acting polite around her. Her. Was Emily. A physical sensation hit her first, a cold wave starting in her stomach and spreading to her fingertips. Her heart didn't race. It seemed to stop entirely, then thud once, painfully hard, against her ribs. She looked toward the hallway. The shower was still running. Mark was still humming. With trembling fingers that felt numb, Emily reached out. She knew his passcode. It was 1014. Their wedding anniversary. October 14th. The irony would strike her later, but in that moment, she just punched in the numbers. The phone unlocked. She didn't go to the gallery. She went straight to WhatsApp. The chat with Chloe was pinned to the top, but the name wasn't Chloe Assistant. It was saved as C. Work, with a red heart emoji next to it. Emily scrolled up. Her thumb moved mechanically, swiping back through time. Yesterday. Last week. Last month. 6 months. It was a library of betrayal. There were photos. Not explicit ones, which somehow might have hurt less, but intimate ones. Selfies taken in this very apartment when Emily was away on business trips. Photos of them having lunch at the cafe Emily loved. And then, there were the voice notes. Emily pressed the phone to her ear, lowering the volume so the sound wouldn't carry down the hall. "Don't worry, babe," Mark's voice whispered. It was the voice he used when he was trying to charm investors. Smooth. Confident. "Just let me get the Entrepreneur of the Year award. Once the investors sign off on the new capital injection, I'll have access to the joint accounts. I'll divorce the boring cow, take half her empire, and we can finally disappear to St. Tropez. She's just a stepping stone, see? You know you're the destination." The boring cow. Emily lowered the phone. She felt nauseous. She looked at her reflection in the dark window glass. She saw a woman who was smart, accomplished, and beautiful. But Mark didn't see that. He saw a bank account. He saw a stepping stone. He saw a cow to be milked and discarded. The shower water stopped. Sudden panic flared in her chest. The silence from the bathroom was deafening. She heard the glass door of the shower slide open. The rustle of a towel. She had seconds that Emily's mind, trained in crisis management for billion-dollar companies, snapped into gear. She closed the app. She wiped the screen on her silk blouse to remove her fingerprints. She placed the phone back on the counter, aligning it exactly as it had been, parallel to the edge of the marble. She grabbed her water glass and took a sip, forcing her throat to swallow despite the lump of bile rising in it. She walked back to the window, turning her back to the room. "Honey," Mark's voice called out from the hallway. He sounded refreshed, light. "Did you see my phone out there? I wanted to check the football scores." Emily closed her eyes for a single second. She inhaled the expensive, filtered air of her beautiful, rotting life. Then she opened her eyes. When she turned around, the mask was firmly in place. "It's on the counter, darling," she said. Her voice was steady, too steady, right where you left it. Mark walked into the kitchen, a towel slung low around his hips, water droplets glistening on his chest. He smiled at her, that devastating, award-winning smile. He picked up the phone, unlocked it casually, and glanced at the screen. He didn't notice a thing. He looked up at Emily and winked. "Thanks. You're the best." "I know," Emily whispered, as Mark walked away toward the bedroom. "I know exactly what I am." The rain outside intensified, lashing against the glass like a warning. The war had begun, and Mark didn't even know he was on the battlefield. The next morning, the sun rose over London with a cruel, cheerful brightness. In the kitchen, the smell of freshly ground Colombian coffee filled the air. To an outsider, it was the picture of domestic bliss. Mark sat at the island, scrolling through Twitter, looking for mentions of his name. Emily stood by the espresso machine, her back to him, watching the dark liquid drip into the cup. Every muscle in her body wanted to scream. She wanted to turn around and throw the scalding coffee in his face. She wanted to shatter the illusion. But Emily was a businesswoman, and she knew that acting on emotion was a quick way to bankruptcy. This required a strategy. "Here you go, darling," Emily said, placing the cup in front of him. She didn't shake. Her voice was light, airy. Mark didn't look up from his phone. "Thanks, babe. Hey, did you see the Forbes article? They're calling me a visionary in retail." "Me? Can you believe it?" Emily leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. She studied his face, the jawline she used to trace with her fingers, the eyes she thought she knew. "I believe it," she lied. "You've always been ambitious." "It's just the beginning," Mark said, taking a sip. "Once we get this award next week, things are going to change. Big time." "You have no idea," Emily thought. For the next 14 days, Emily lived a double life. By day, she was the supportive wife, posting throwback photos on Instagram with captions like, "So proud of my husband's journey, red heart, #power couple." She arranged his tie in the mornings. She listened to his speeches. She fed his ego until it was bloated and blind. But by night, or in the stolen moments when Mark was at the gym training, which she now knew was code for meeting Chloe, Emily was at work. She didn't go to a divorce lawyer first. She went to a forensic accountant. The meeting took place in a small, windowless office in Holborn, far away from the glass towers where she and Mark usually did business. Mr. Graves, a man who looked like he hadn't smiled since the 1990s, slid a thick file across the mahogany desk. "It's worse than you thought, Mrs. Sterling," Graves said, his voice dry as dust. Emily opened the folder. Rows and rows of numbers. "Explain it to me like I'm 5. Graves pointed a bony finger at a highlighted column. "Your husband isn't just spending your money. He's laundering it. He set up 3 shell companies: Blue Horizon, Apex Consulting, and C Ventures. He's been invoicing your charity foundation for consulting fees that never happened. He takes the money from the foundation, moves it to these shell companies, and then transfers it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Emily felt a cold sweat prickle her neck. How much? Over £4 million in the last 18 months, Graves said. And here's the clincher. To authorize these transfers, he needed a second signature. Yours. Emily frowned. I never signed those. Graves pulled out a magnified document. We know. He forged your signature. It's a decent copy, but under digital analysis, the pressure points are all wrong. This isn't just divorce material, Emily. This is fraud, embezzlement, forgery. This is 15 years in prison. Emily stared at the forged signature of her own name. It was the ultimate violation. He hadn't just betrayed her heart. He had tried to make her an accomplice to his crime. She closed the folder. The sound was final. Can we prove he is the sole beneficiary of those offshore accounts? Emily asked. We need one thing, Graves said. A digital confirmation, a login, or a recorded admission that he controls Sea Ventures. Without that, he could claim his identity was stolen or that someone else set up the accounts. Emily nodded slowly. A plan began to form in her mind. A plan so cold it terrified even her. The awards ceremony, she whispered. Excuse me. The Entrepreneur of the Year award, Emily said, looking up, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intelligence. He's arrogant. He feels untouchable. If I can make him feel like he's already won, he'll get sloppy. She went home that night and found Mark in the living room, trying on his tuxedo. He looked handsome, objectively, painfully handsome. How do I look? He asked, adjusting his cufflinks. Emily walked up to him. She placed her hands on his lapels, smoothing the fabric over the heart that didn't beat for her. She looked up into his eyes and gave the performance of her life. You look like a winner, Mark, she said softly. You know, I was thinking, for the ceremony, we should do something special. A video tribute. I want the world to see the real you. Mark's ego flared like a match in a dark room. A tribute? Like a montage of my achievements. Exactly, Emily said. I'll handle it personally. I want it to be a surprise. I want you to stand on that stage and see exactly what you've built. Mark grinned, kissing her briefly on the lips. God, I love how much you believe in me. Do whatever you want, babe. I trust you. Emily smiled back. I won't let you down. That night, while Mark slept soundly, dreaming of his freedom and his money, Emily sat in her study. She wasn't editing a tribute. She was splicing together audio clips. She was syncing timestamps. She was preparing the slide deck from hell. The trap was set. The mouse had taken the cheese. Now, all she had to do was wait for the snap. The grand ballroom of the Dorchester Hotel was a galaxy of artificial stars. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting prisms of light onto the hundreds of guests below. It was a sea of black ties, silk gowns, and the distinct, metallic smell of old money. Emily and Mark sat at table 1, right in front of the stage. Mark was vibrating with energy. He kept checking his reflection in his spoon, smoothing his hair, adjusting his bow tie. He was a man ready to be crowned king. Nervous? Emily asked, taking a sip of water. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet, high-necked and long-sleeved. It was severe, elegant, and armored. Excited, Mark corrected her, squeezing her knee under the table. This is it, Em. After tonight, we're in the big leagues. Emily smiled, but didn't reply. She looked at her phone. The battery was at 100%. The signal was strong. Everything was ready to 9:45 p.m. The host took the stage. The lights dimmed, focusing a single, blinding spotlight on the podium. And now, the host boomed, for the most anticipated award of the evening. For innovation, leadership, and integrity, the Entrepreneur of the Year award goes to Mark Sterling. The applause was thunderous. Mark shot up from his chair, buttoning his jacket. He kissed Emily's cheek, a quick, distracted peck, and strode toward the stairs. He bounded up to the stage, accepted the heavy glass trophy, and stepped up to the microphone. He looked out at the crowd. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. Thank you, Mark said, his voice echoing through the massive speakers. They say success is a lonely road, but I've never felt alone. I want to thank my team, my investors, and most importantly, my wife, Emily. She's the silent force behind all of this. In the front row, Emily didn't clap. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her phone. She opened Instagram. Tap. Live. The notification went out to 5.2 million people. Emily Sterling is live. A special tribute. Mark was still speaking. We believe in transparency. We believe in building a legacy. Emily tapped a button on her phone that was synced to the venue's AV system. A little access privilege she had secured by generously sponsoring the event's tech setup 2 days prior. Behind Mark, the massive 40-foot LED screen flickered. The logo of the event vanished. "I have a surprise for everyone," Mark said, gesturing to the screen behind him, thinking this was Emily's loving tribute. "Take a look at our journey." Music started playing, but it wasn't the inspiring orchestral score Mark expected. It was a recording. Crisp, clear, and unmistakable. "She's so stupid, Chloe. It's almost too easy." Mark's voice, booming through the ballroom. Mark froze. He chuckled nervously into the mic. Looks like we have the wrong audio clip there. Tech team." The screen turned black, then exploded into color. But it wasn't a montage of success. It was a screenshot. A WhatsApp conversation blown up to the size of a billboard. "Sender." Mark message. "Just sign the fake invoices. $200K moving to the Cayman account tonight. Emily thinks it's for the charity gala. LOL." A collective gasp swept through the room like a cold wind. The applause died instantly. The silence was absolute, broken only by the damning audio continuing to play. "Once I get the award, the bank releases the trust fund. Then I dump her, take the cash, and we're gone." Mark turned around. He saw the screen. He saw his own words, his own voice, his own crime projected for the entire elite of London to see. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He spun back to the crowd, panic seizing his throat. This is a deep fake. This is a hack. Cut the feed. Cut it." He looked down at Emily. Emily was sitting perfectly still. She held her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at him like the barrel of a gun. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was just watching him burn. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a document. A bank transfer record showing funds moving from the Sterling charity to Sea Ventures, offshore. And right next to it, a split-screen video of Mark and his assistant, Chloe, kissing in the elevator of his office building. The crowd began to murmur. Phones were out. Flashes were popping. Mark wasn't being celebrated. He was being documented. "Emily!" Mark screamed into the microphone, his voice cracking. "Stop this. What are you doing?" Emily stood up. She walked to the edge of the stage. She looked up at him, her face bathed in the glow of the screen. She didn't need a microphone. The silence in the room was so deep that her voice carried clearly. "Transparency, Mark," she said. "You said you believe in transparency." Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The sound turned every head in the room. 4 officers in uniform. 2 detectives in suits. They didn't look confused. They looked like they had a reservation. Mark took a step back, knocking over the podium. The glass trophy fell and shattered into 1,000 pieces, a perfect metaphor for his life. "Mark Sterling," the lead detective shouted, walking down the center aisle. "I'm Detective Miller. You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and forgery." Mark looked at the police, then back at the screen, then down at Emily. He looked like a trapped animal. "You," he whispered, realizing the depth of the setup. "You planned this. You planned all of it." Every second, Emily mouthed. The police swarmed the stage. They grabbed Mark's arms, pulling them behind his back. The click-click of the handcuffs was audible over the speakers that were still broadcasting the sound of his assistant giggling as they dragged him down the stairs. Past the table where he had sat just minutes ago, Mark locked eyes with Emily one last time. He was crying now. Ugly, panicked tears. "Emily, please. Call the lawyers. Tell them it's a mistake." Emily didn't move. She looked at the live stream on her phone. The viewer count had hit 300,000. Comments were flying too fast to read. Justice. OMG. Queen. She looked at the camera lens of her phone and spoke one final sentence to the world. "The show is over." But the truth is just beginning. She tapped and live. The screen behind the stage went black. Mark was shoved into the back of a police car outside, the flashing blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside the ballroom, Emily picked up her clutch. She didn't look at the shocked guests staring at her in awe and terror. She turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She was alone. She was single. And for the first time in years, she was free.